welcome back to the Worth Listening podcast. Boy, do I have a treat for you all. Chloe is back. So, for those of you who don't know, Chloe is a certified financial planner along with myself. We're financial planning besties, and we did a series called Know Better, Do Better. Was it earlier? It was 2021, actually. We haven't done anything in 2022 yet, right, Chloe?
Right.
Yes. And so we got together because we kept bumping into all these like kind of schemy things and myths and, just misinformation that clients were bringing to us. And we're like, we got to be able to share this information with people, enlighten the world with good financial knowledge. And so we decided to do Know Better, Do Better as a series. It went excellent. You all loved it. You asked for more. And so we are back. This time around, we're going to do kind of a behind the numbers sort of series with the Know Better, Do Better. So adding numbers to some of the examples and things that people kind of get caught up in as it pertains to narratives. Chloe, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
All right. So at the top of every show in this series, we do trends, taxes, and tea. It is the latest trends on how to save more and pay less on something. Or we share, a little bit of tea, help you not get taxed so much. So, Chloe, what do you have for us? Trends, taxes, and tea this time around.
Yeah. So many of you have probably heard last month, Bank of America announced a new 0% down payment, zero closing cost mortgage solution for first-time home buyers. And this initiative was targeted specifically for Black and Hispanic communities and first-time home buyers. And then recently, Citi announced earlier this month a similar program. And then another company decided to jump on the bandwagon, Legacy Home Loans. They're the largest Black-owned mortgage company. So they announced they're closing the GAP program just last week. So basically, all of these are kind of solutions to help people who, want to buy their first home. They don't have the money to put down. And so they're able to buy their first home with nothing down, no closing costs, zero cost to you. What do you think about that, Lauren?
It sounds so wonderful, except for that it kind of doesn't. And so people are just like, but why? This is great. This is going to, close the racial wealth divide. This is going to close the, generational wealth gaps, all the different sorts of gaps that we know exist that are very, very real. But we also need to be thinking about like, what happens if a person is not in a good financial situation to be able to purchase a home? And we see in ordinary situations so frequently where someone has good income, has the means to be able to buy a home, but is still not in a good financial position to be able to do so. And it all goes kaplooey. I think that these programs put a lot of people at risk because when you have 0% down, that means you have very little, actually no skin in the game. What does that also mean? That doesn't change the price of the home. So that means a much higher mortgage. Sometimes people don't have good credit. They don't have good credit because they've made some sort of financial mistakes in the past. They also may not have an emergency fund. So they don't have any savings for the down payment, but they also don't have any savings as a backup plan to be able to help them should something happen when they get into this new house. Like your house floods, because I just saw that happen with the client, or your air conditioning breaks in the middle of the summer. Now you've got these really expensive things that you're on the hook for, and maybe not a lot of income to be able to do it. So, could these programs be good? Yeah, but there also are some drawbacks. Chloe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think on one hand, the programs can be helpful, but I think it should be targeted towards like people who are very responsible, have good credit, or good savers, but maybe they just don't quite have the amount needed for a down payment. So I think these programs that tend to attract people that may not have any money down, and like you said, they don't have any emergency savings, and so you're getting into a house with zero savings and you put zero down. So you're starting out with no equity, and then something breaks, and what do? You have to get more debt. Potentially go to your credit cards or other solutions, or you might need to get something fixed or get the house put together. So I've seen several clients take out personal loans to do work on the house after they take out a mortgage. So a lot of those things can just kind of put you in a bad situation. But if you are a good saver, but maybe it's going to take you forever to save the 20% down, but everything else is good, you have a good emergency fund, you have good credit, it could really be beneficial.
Yeah. And I think another piece of the puzzle is, like you said, too much home and what too much home is, and whether or not you're going to be able to afford your mortgage over the long term. Because we've definitely seen situations where someone is approved for something, but they can't actually swing it in light of the other things that they have going on. And one of the big things I see is daycare as an expense that's not accounted for. So usually when you're getting approved for a home, they're looking at your monthly debt to income ratio. Well, daycare is not a debt. It's just a regular part of your expenses, just like your other parts of your spending. So they don't know how much you're spending on food or hanging out or vacations. Daycare is a pretty stiff and serious obligation that a lot of people have, but it can be as much as your mortgage. I've seen some $2,300 daycare expenses. I don't know what you're seeing in your world, Chloe, but what are some of the expenses that maybe are not accounted for, but pretty relevant as it pertains to whether or not you're going to be able to afford your mortgage and those other expenses?
Well, yeah, another big one, and you probably see this a lot of student loans. We've had all this time where people have not been paying on their student loans or getting accustomed to not paying their student loans, and those payments, are scheduled to come back in January. So, once you factor those back into your budget, if you had $1,000 a month, student loan payment, how is that going to affect things? And then also just the calculations I know for student loans, they've kind of made those a little bit more favorable so people could afford to buy a house, but that still doesn't negate the fact that you have this big student loan payment.
Yeah, it's all about organized finances. So we said that this series is going to be diving into the numbers, getting behind the scenes and talking a little bit about what it looks like, as you think about home ownership versus renting and whether or not it's the right time for you to be able to purchase. So let's start jumping in and breaking down some of the numbers.
Yeah, so we can start out with so we want to compare home ownership versus renting, because a lot of times, there's this narrative that renting is throwing money away, and just you should always buy. It's always the better choice. It's a great investment, and so we want to break down and kind of compare the two so you can see which one actually might work out. And these are all, of course, hypothetical numbers, but this is just to kind of give you some examples. So just thinking about renting, first of all, because that's the simpler one of the two. So your cost to rent, it's essentially just your rent itself. When you think about getting into an apartment, a lot of times if you have good credit, you don't necessarily have to put a down, or not a down payment, but a deposit, down on your rent. If you get an apartment, sometimes if you're renting from like a house or a condo or something like that, sometimes you might have to put 1 month of rent down if you're renting from like a landlord or individual owner and not like a complex. So your only cost there would just be, at most probably 1 month of rent to pay as a deposit. Outside of that, you have your monthly rental costs. If anything breaks, you call your landlord and they come and fix it for you. There's really you can take advantage of all the amenities. If you have a pool, tennis court, clubhouse, like all those fun things, gym. So I mean, it's really rent is really just the most that you'll pay in that situation. And then there are places where thinking like New York, California, where rent could easily be $5,000 a month, and it could be very expensive. But just knowing that that's the most that you'll pay, and you're not responsible for any kind of maintenance or upkeep, that's pretty much how the renting world works.
Okay, so let's start getting into these numbers. So I did a little bit of research prior to our podcast today, and one of the things I learned was that Atlanta and Dallas have very similar cost of living. It's off by a little bit. They actually say that Atlanta is slightly more expensive now than Dallas, which I found
Oh
to be
wow.
interesting, but just by a little bit, like, by like 50 or $60. These are these online calculators that are kind of constantly keeping track of, various indexes to make sure that they can keep up with cost of living. So what is an apartment going for? Let's start to nail down like what it looks like to be in an apartment versus like, oh, I can go spend the same amount of money, which is never really ends up being the same. Um, and get a mortgage. So like maybe like what's a $2,000 a month kind of rent in Atlanta? What can you get for that?
Yeah, for 2000 a month, it depends on if you want to live in the city or the suburbs, of course. But for 2000 a month, you could easily get an extremely nice 1 bedroom, or a decent 2 bedroom. just depending on the location.
Okay. All right. So I think that's a good starting point. It's like someone's paying around $2,000 a month, either they're living in the cool, hip part of town, like you said, in a swanky little one bedroom, or they've moved a little bit outside, they got more space, and they're spending about $2,000 a month. And they're like, I'm throwing away this 2 grand every month. This is $24,000 a year that I'm just like, you know, trashing. Instead, I think I'm going to buy a home. Well, what's a reasonable amount of home probably for someone? Like what is are there $100,000 houses in Atlanta still? Is that a thing? Can I live downtown for $100,000?
No.
No, not an option. Okay. So
Yeah. So at this point, I mean, the prices have gone up significantly, as you know, in the last few years. But I would say, depending on if you want like a condo, if you're okay with like a condo and maybe even like a 1 bedroom condo, you could probably get that for 200s maybe,
mm.
or even a 2 bedroom condo, maybe in the high 200s. If
Is
you're
that in the
looking at
city or is that in the outskirts somewhere?
that, that could be in the outside of the city.
Okay. In the outside city, right? In the not directly in the city part, but
But yeah, and then as far as a single family home, to get, yeah, a nice single family home, and this would probably even be, yeah, a little outside of the city, 300 to 400 minimum.
okay. All right. I feel like that's about the same in Dallas. Like you said, you want to live downtown. $2,000 is a normal rent. No
Mhm.
option to buy downtown for 1 or 200,000. And like you said, most people are saying they want to be able to purchase something that is theirs, is gonna have a little bit more space. And so let's go with 425 as a number for a
Mhm.
home. I think that's a reasonable amount that you can see an average home. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of clients kind of come to me with, like, I can't find anything in my area for less than that amount, regardless of where they live.
Right.
So let's use that for our example today. So we've got a $400,000 purchase price. What do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so there's a lot of costs associated with getting into a house. So the first thing, and first and foremost, is down payment. So if you don't want to pay PMI, which is primary mortgage insurance, and if you're not participating in one of these programs, where you put 0% down or less than 20% down, you have the 20% down payment on that 425,000.
So 425,000, a 20% down payment. We're talking like 85 grand, right?
Yeah.
So you need to save up close to $100,000 to have that 20% down payment. Now, one of the things I think people bump into is like, well, it's going to take me forever to do that. Right now I'm saving 200 bucks a month. Like, how long is it going to take me to save up 85,000? I think that speaks to like what does your income look like and whether or not you're going to be able to afford the 425 house in the first place. Because we also know that being approved for something does not mean that you can afford it. So they may say all day long, here's the approval for a $400,000 house, but if you're earning 40 grand a year, it's going to be a tough swing. So what is some benchmarks, or how should we be thinking about like what a person, in order to be able to buy a $425,000 house, what kind of income should you have?
Yeah, I typically say, to be conservative, anywhere from 2.5 to, at the high end, 3 times your income is what you can typically afford.
Okay. All right. So if we go with the 2.5, so that means like taking your income times 2.5,
Mhm.
and that's how much you can afford. So in an example, you earn 100,000 times 2.5, that's 250K as a home. Is that? Yep. All
Yeah.
right. So to get to 425, we kind of got to back into it. Let's just divide by 2.5. That gives us $170,000. So in order to be able to, reasonably afford a $425,000 home, we're talking about 170K of income. How many like people do you feel like are in the 170K range of income in America? I guess maybe in general, but then also like in proportion to the number of people you've seen purchase a 425
Oh yeah. Yeah. The numbers are way off. So, and actually clients that make around 170,000, like they're getting approved for, 6, 7, 800,000, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm. So do you spend a lot of time trying to talk your client off the ledge? Well, of course I need a $600,000 house. I can't find anything to 400s. That's in the hood. Like I can't live like this. What do you mean I can only afford 425?
Yeah, I see a lot of clients, stretching their budget for sure. And it's like you start out with I'll start out and I'll crunch the numbers and say, here's a reasonable target. And then, like you said, they just cannot find anything for that price. So yeah, it's definitely difficult.
I would say difficult is an understatement, but I think what's important about this process is realizing, what are the long-term effects of making a decision to buy more house than you can afford. I mean, and to even go back to that, we talk a lot about goals. So aligning your spending with your values is step number one to creating a good financial plan. And so is your goal to, be in this house for the next 30 years, pass it down to, your children? Is it that you love to travel and you're never going to be home anyway, but you just don't want to throw your money away on rent? What are your personal goals? Is it, to start a family? Is it to, find a spouse, or you already have a spouse and you want to expand your family? Like there's so many different options and variations for, what is the reason behind the home purchase? If the reason is simply like, I'm a grown up, it's the next best thing to do, it's probably not ideal to buy a home.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a client tell me once, I just feel like this is what I should be doing. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't think that's the way to start with financial decisions. It's what you should be doing.
Yeah. Should versus what you absolutely should be doing. slightly different. It should be doing. All right. So we have a $425,000 home. We decided to put a 20% down payment down, which means like I said, we needed to save up $85,000. We did that in this example. And now we're going to go out and get a mortgage. It looks like the mortgage is going to be around $1,930. And that's just the monthly payment for the mortgage. That's not including the interest. That's not including what do we have to pay? Property taxes. Those are other things we got to consider here.
Yeah.
And so with reasonable interest and not interest, I mixed the words up. Insurance, because we've got to insure this home. They're not going to let you have a home without homeowners insurance. No mortgage company would reasonably allow that because they're trying to protect themselves and their investment. So property taxes, insurance, that brings us up to basically a $2,700 payment. So it says $2,630 is what we got as a payment.
And I wanted to stop you there because I actually have a client that recently purchased a home. And I think a lot of times people underestimate all the additional costs, and so, in our example here, you were saying the principal and interest, just of the mortgage itself is $1,900. So if you're comparing that to $2,000 rent, you're like, oh, well, I can pay the same in a mortgage as I do in rent, but you're not factoring in all those other costs that are associated with homeownership, like the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance. If you put less than 20% down, you will have to pay PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. And then if you live in a neighborhood, like a residential neighborhood with single family homes where you have an HOA, or if you're in a townhouse or a condo, you have monthly HOA fees. And I mean, those could go as high as $500 to $1,000 a month, depending on where you're living. If you have a doorman and all the amenities and all the things. So, I mean, just, in this case, there's no HOA fees, no PMI, just the property taxes and homeowners insurance adds, an additional $700 a month in our example.
Yeah. And I think you bring up, like you said, a really good point is like people, find a quick online calculator and they're like, oh, I can get this much house and it's only going to be this much. And, the 2,000 versus the same 2,000. Well, the other piece of the puzzle is you've been paying $2,000 in rent. What's your savings been looking like? Mm-hmm. And if you haven't been able to save $700 a month towards some other goal, i.e. even the down payment, then where is this money going to magically come from? So if you end up in a situation where you end up with a $2,700 mortgage, from a $2,000 rent that you were just paying. That $700 a month needs to come from some piece of the puzzle. Ideally, you've already been used to not having that $700 available, and you're just repurposing it from one aspect of your budget over to the other aspect. But where it gets really dangerous and dicey, and this is what we were talking about as it pertains to, some of these new 0% down programs, is that you end up with a new payment. Maybe you feel like the payment is, like you said, just a little bit more, but that money wasn't already readily available. You didn't already have good financial foundation in place. And so now it's creating additional strain on your budget. And then, God forbid, something break. What have you seen in that regard?
Yeah. And then, I mean, that's additional money that you have to come up with. So if you're, outside of the additional $700 a month that you're paying, that includes the property taxes and homeowners insurance, then are you able to save for repairs and maintenance and things that'll pop up? Even if it's a brand new house, you still have things that, could break, things that could go wrong.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say, but I am getting a new construction home, so I'm not going to have to worry about any of that. Yeah. Do you have any stories, Chloe, about what happened?
Oh yeah. Like there's, the fence that is not there that needs to be put up around the brand new house. Some of the landscaping, even just the regular maintenance, without even repairs, there's yard work. Are you going to go out and push the lawnmower and trim the bushes and trim the trees and clean the gutters and like all those things that need to be done on a regular basis just to maintain the home, and pay for pest control, termites, just all those things.
And one other important piece of the puzzle is poor craftsmanship. You get this brand new home, someone put it all together, it's all nice and new. It passed various inspections, but it is not foolproof. I have seen multiple examples of someone getting into a home that was brand new and the pipes needing to be dug up and start all over again. Are some of those things under warranty? Absolutely. But now you're moving out of your home, you're being inconvenienced, you're maybe eating out a lot more. Like, your insurance might cover something like that, but it's definitely going to be some additional expenses related to you specifically. And that's also like making sure you have proper insurance, not cutting corners and saying like, give me the cheapest kind of insurance because, oh my goodness, something breaks in your new home that you never expected anything to break in. And you're on the hook for it. You're the homeowner. It's your stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing to think about too is just, one of the things I hear all the time is, your mortgage stays the same, your rent goes up every year. And something that people don't factor in, again, is property taxes will increase. If your house is appreciating at the rate that it has, especially in the last few years, your property taxes have probably gone up significantly. And I've had several clients and friends, come to me and say, that their mortgage payment in total, including property taxes and insurance, went up by $500 to $1,000 a month.
I know somebody who is in that situation. I was talking to them today. Another thing that a lot of people have bumped into is, these cash out refis during the COVID. Housing prices went way up. And so it's like, oh, I had a $200,000 house. Now all of a sudden I magically got a $400,000 house. And everybody keeps saying like, get the equity, you can go do some things with that. So you take $100,000 out of your home that you didn't necessarily need. It just magically appeared overnight. But guess what? Your property value has gone up. Your property taxes is going to go up. And now you have a new bigger mortgage. And so that is yet another piece of the puzzle. Just like Chloe saying, like property taxes is that thing that you can't guarantee is going to stay the same. If you live in a place where there are hurricanes or flooding or things like that, that can also make your property insurance go up gargantuanly from one year to the next. So you have to be mindful that this number that you start out with is not the number that you're going to stick with over the next 30 years. And it can get really expensive. Like, how much does this mortgage cost? We're talking $425. We put, 20% down. So we had like a $340,000 mortgage. So that's another piece. It's like $425 was the sticker price. You put some of your own money in. $340 is the loan price, but you pay interest. You pay, over a course of time. So what is it looking like for us to pay on this house for 30 years? Is it just $340,000?
Yeah, and that's another thing. And of course, interest rates have gone up significantly in the last year. But the interest on these mortgages, especially these 30-year mortgages, is pretty significant. And a lot of times you can kind of count on paying almost double for the house about by the time the 30-year term is up.
Yeah, I'm seeing $354,000 of interest paid for a total loan cost of $694,000. So we're at almost $700,000 when we bought a house that was $425,000. It costs money over time. And I think that's one of the things that people don't take for granted. So if you sell your house, um, let's say for $700,000 later, you're like, woo, I bought this for 425, and look at me 30 years later, I sold it for 700. Well, you also paid 700 for it over that time period.
Yeah, and that's just the interest. I mean, and the principal. That doesn't include all the taxes, insurance, all the repairs, the maintenance that you've done over that 30 years. So you have to kind of subtract all those things out when you're thinking about how much money you quote unquote made on your house.
Mm-hmm. So, Chloe, are you saying don't ever buy a home, or is it okay for people to buy a home and maybe they just need to consider a few things first?
Yeah, it's definitely okay. I think we kind of get a bad rap as like anti home ownership. We're definitely not. I think buying a home is something. It's a very personal decision, and it's something that kind of you have to think about your lifestyle, and does this really fit your lifestyle? Does this fit your goals? Is this a place that you plan on being in for at least 7 to 10 years? If the answer is yes to all those things, then yeah, and also financially, do you have the good foundation? Are you able to afford the house? If all those things are a yes, then absolutely buying a house is a great decision. If you're on the fence about some of these things, if it's maybe 2 years in, like a couple of my clients right now, 2 years into buying a house, it's like, oh, I don't. This is home ownership stuff is not what I was thinking. I want to get out of it. That's probably not a good decision at the end of the day.
Ooh, yeah, that could be a whole nother behind the numbers. But can you talk a little bit about the idea of like bailing out shortly after getting in and some of the fees and things that you need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so yeah, let's talk about it on the back end. So, let's say, you bought this $425,000 house, and with all the great appreciation that we've had in the last couple of years, let's say the house, goes up to 500,000 and it's maybe a year and a half later and you want to sell it. So the first thing that you have to think about there is commissions, real estate commissions. The person that helps you sell the house, the agent, and the agent that helps the buyer buy the house from you, both of those people have to get paid. And they get paid a percentage of the cost of the house or whatever it's sold for. So in this example, for a $500,000 house, the commission is 6% total, so 3% to each agent. So I mean that's $30,000 right there in commissions.
Yikes. 30,000 right out the door. So my 500 went to 470.
Yeah.
And it's like
So
I kind of could have won, yeah, because I paid 425, but also I've been paying on the house for 2 years. I probably did some fixing up.
mhm.
That's where the property value went up. I put in some $20,000 worth of, I don't know, fancy something or other. Yeah, you could kind of break even or even end up in the hole.
Yeah, and the 85,000 that you put into it too, factor that
Right.
in. So yeah, it's just that, and that's just commissions. I mean, there could be some closing costs, that are associated with selling the house. Sometimes buyers might ask for closing costs or money towards closing costs. So that's kind of, you have to factor that into the total sale price. And then you also have to think about, there's typically an inspection that the buyers will do, and so they'll get someone to come out and inspect every aspect of your house and see what things need to be fixed or what things are broken, and so the buyer could come back and ask you to make repairs or reduce the sale price, and so all those things kind of add up.
Yeah, and I think also what's really relevant is that during COVID, we all got a little bit like, woohoo, the housing market's going crazy. And we think like that's how the housing market's been forever. We've kind of erased all the things of the past. And we forgot about the idea that houses don't usually grow from 425 to 500 over a period of 2 years. You might
Yeah.
be from 425 to maybe 435.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing these big numbers, and people automatically assume like, oh, I'm gonna flip my house and double the amount that I'm gonna earn on it in a very very short period of time. There's a really good chance that 2 years from purchasing it, a much larger chance, COVID notwithstanding, that you're selling it for the same 425 you bought it for. In that case, that 6% is 25,000. It's not a whole lot different than the 30,000 that was the 500,000. So now you're spending $25,000 to pay those commissions for the exact same purchase price, and you definitely are losing money in that situation.
Yeah, but yeah, you have to really, and that's why we say, like, if you're going to buy a house, make sure that you're comfortable with staying in it for at least 7 to 10 years, because you do need time to to have some equity in the house for the house to appreciate, um, and really just make it so that if you sell it, you're not going to be underwater and having to come to closing with cash.
Absolutely. I think, the big takeaway today is the idea that you need to create a financial foundation that is strong, and that patience is a virtue. While it is exciting to jump into a house, to tell your friends I'm buying a house, and, to show off, have a little housewarming, it doesn't bode well if 2 years later you're trying to get out of it and you're back to renting because you kind of had to tuck your tail and do damage control. Or if 2 years later you're in $30,000 to $40,000 of credit card debt because you're just trying to stay afloat because the house is too expensive for you to be able to take your nice vacation and also pay your mortgage, or like I said, cover your children's daycare and also pay your mortgage. And don't forget, like, what is the main thing you're trying to accomplish? For a lot of people, it's retirement. So what if you're sacrificing your retirement savings in order to be able to afford your home? Um, do you really want the $600,000 house because there's just not a $400,000 one that's available that would suit your needs? Or would you rather 20 years from now to be able to retire and have bought the $300,000 house instead of the 400, which was kind of the top end of your price range in the first place? So it's all about understanding your goals.
Yeah, and really making sure that you understand the numbers at the end of the day. It's like with a lot of times, people do compare the cost of renting with the cost of home ownership. And I've yet to see a situation for a client that wants to buy a house where their total cost is going to be less than what they're paying in renting.
Mm, yeah, it's a really good point. I think one last thing that we can do to kind of like drive home the point of the numbers, we talked about this person earning $170,000. So we do know that 100, like, it was like, woo, that's a lot of money. I think a lot of our listeners are like, oh my goodness, I don't earn that much. That means I have to buy a house smaller. Or they're even saying like, I bought a house that was more expensive than that and I don't earn that much. What kind of situation am I in? But here's some of the things to be thinking about as you sort through your own situation. So 170K of gross income, we got to pay some taxes. So let's sweep out a little bit for taxes. Roughly 24%, we bring you down to 129K. So you already have lost $40,000 of your money to Uncle Sam. And then if we do that 129 and we just divide it by 12, we're at $10,000 a month, $10,700 a month. Well, guess what? You didn't save anything for retirement yet. So if 170K, I think we agree that you should be able to max out your retirement account. And when I say max out, that's putting $20,000 into your retirement. So instead of making 170K on paper, you make 150K on paper. Why is that awesome? Because you pay Uncle Sam based on 150K of income, so you pay less taxes, but also you're loading up your retirement account. If you're new to higher earning, just becoming a six-figure earner, like sweep that money right off the top and get used to a cost of living or a lifestyle that already has that retirement taken out. So let's say you do that responsible thing and you put the retirement money away. We're now down to 108 as income, and that's $9,000 a month you're bringing. Well, with $9,000 a month coming home, they say that your housing cost should be roughly like 30% of your income. That's a $2,700 mortgage. That was exactly where we came with this person. So can the person afford the 425 home? Yes, the answer is yes, if they put 20% down. Well, also, like I said, you're bringing home this $9,000, 2,700 of it is either rent or, in, like you said, our case, our goal is to be mortgage. Are you able to save above and beyond so that you can actually have this money to be able to get the down payment. So if 2,700 of what you're already paying, and you're paying that toward rent, you also need to be able to come up with maybe $1,000 a month would get you 85 months until you had your down payment. So these are the kind of things you need to be thinking through. You're like, oh, wait a minute, Lauren. Now you're like, I earn $9,000. I do pay $2,700 a month in rent, and I definitely want to turn that into a mortgage. But where are you going to get the money to save? And $1,000 a month in my example sometimes sounds like a lot to people. You're like, you want me to save what? Well, then we talked about 85 months. Like there's 12 months in a year. So we got 12 and 12 is 24. Yeah, we're talking years. 4 years of, right. It doesn't happen overnight though, is the point that I'm driving home. Is like, even for somebody who's earning $170,000 a year, it could take you 4 years to save up for a home. And we live in this world right now where it's like, I want it tomorrow. I want to be able to buy a house, by the end of this year. I get clients that come to me all the time and say that. I got $0 saved, but by the end of the year, they want to be a home buyer. We need an emergency fund. I need you to start putting some money into retirement, and I need you to start saving for the home down payment. Even if it's not going to be a 20% down payment, we're probably not going to be there by the end of the year. So, they said,
let's factor in other things too. Like, do you have an old car that could break down in the next couple of years, and then you have to get a new car? Do you have money saved to pay cash for a car, or are you going to finance a car? And what is that payment going to look like? And how does, once you add that to your mortgage, what does that total look like, as far as your debt payments?
Yeah, there are a lot of things to be thinking about. And like I said, it's not to tell you not to do this, but it's to tell you that, one, like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. So, while it seems like your friend just bought the house overnight, maybe they did do a 0% down program. Maybe they're not in the best financial situation because of making that choice. Or maybe your friend's a really good saver, and you should start having conversations with them about, like, how did you do that? How did you get a home? How did you save up? Like, oh, you're able to save what? If this is a real good friend, they should be okay with being transparent and helping you get motivated to be able to do the same thing. Because not everybody knows or comes from a background where saving is even something that's talked about ever. It's just like, you get money, you spend money. You get money, you spend money. And they're incredibly intelligent people who don't have any concept of saving. So if you're trying to figure out how everyone else is doing it, just ask someone who you've seen do it. And you might be surprised to learn, like I said, either they're not doing it right, they're putting themselves in a tough situation, or that they're doing a really good job, and it could be motivation for you. You can come alongside them. You can learn from other people. I want everybody to have a certified financial planner, of course, but you can absolutely learn from your mom, from your friends, from your cousins, from your coworker. There's tons of people out there that are making really good financial decisions. And instead of just kind of seeing what they're doing and saying, hey, I want to have that, I want to do that, I'm just going to do it. Figure out the how behind making it happen, and what's the way that's going to make it happen in the most cost efficient way for you.
Yeah. And one final note is, just thinking about like equity in your home. And, when you're putting 0% down, you're starting out with zero equity in your house. And so, and even if you put, a small down payment, I know, for FHA loans, you can do 3.5%. And some people, put other various amounts that are less than 20. But, you're starting out with little to no equity in your home. And sometimes people are financing their closing costs, and that's another thing. So, you could have either negative equity or zero equity going into the house. So at that point, your only options to get equity are to pay down the mortgage, which takes a while because you typically pay more interest than principal, and it takes about 10 years or so to start paying some meaningful principal on the loan. And then your other option is to hope that the house continues to appreciate. And that's not a winning strategy, to hope that your house just continues to appreciate so you can get more equity. So, just to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a potentially bad situation if housing prices do go down, you want to put, bare minimum 10% down on a house.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to wrap up on. Equity equals ownership. No equity, no ownership. So you effectively bought a home, but you don't own any of it because you don't have any equity. So how is that very different than renting? As we wrap up today, let's go with a money quote. What is today's money quote? What is today's money quote? today's money quote, Chloe?
Yes, tongue twister. Today's money quote is successful homeownership is not just putting people in homes, it's also making sure people get to keep their homes. And that is by Michelle Collins.
Hallelujah. Amen. We are not opposed to you getting in a home, but we want you to absolutely be able to keep your home, because that is the true value of being able to say, hey, I'm a home owner. All the memories you're going to create, all the wonderful experiences that you can have, they can happen in that home, but you need to be able to keep that home. And we don't want it to be a point of stress for you. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Know Better, Do Better series. We will be coming back to you in just 2 short weeks with more information behind the numbers.
All right. Thank you.